Well, hello, friends, and welcome once again to another episode of the 360 Experience. I'm your host, Tim Braheem, and today is a day where I get to have a conversation with a dear friend, a very special guest who I've known for a short period of time, only about 3 years. But boy, have I really grown to admire who Chris Ledlie is as a human being. I want to tell you a little bit about this episode because it is full of a variety of topics that I think are incredibly timely to today's market, and one that you're definitely going to want to listen to in its entirety. So sit down and make sure you take some great notes. Chris started in the mortgage business in 2002. You're going to hear that story in terms of how he fell into it, starting with Bank of America. And then he worked his way up as an originator, in 2015, transitioned full time into being a leader for large companies such as Cobalt, which then became Caliber. And now he is a owner and divisional president of Neo Home Loans. So Chris brings not only a wealth of experience from having been in the industry for a long time, but he's been on several sides of the coin. In our conversation today, we're going to talk about the mindset that is required to be successful in today's market, what he's seeing from top originators that are still doing well, even with rates as high as they are and inventory as low as it is. We're going to talk about how to really set up a plan to master your mindset and the importance of the game being won between the ears, so to speak. Right now is a precious time in the market where controlling our temperament, controlling our energy, selecting the things that we are going to allow ourselves to focus on is so incredibly vital. And we're going to get into a lot of that. Chris is going to talk to us about his morning routine and how that sets him up for success. We're going to talk a lot about leadership. We're going to talk about the difference between having a employee mindset as a loan originator and an entrepreneurial mindset as an originator, and why that is so incredibly important. For those of you that are leaders, we're going to talk about recruiting. For those of you that are originators that are thinking about leaving your company, we're going to talk about what you need to be looking out for if you're being recruited and if you want to find a new home. Finally, we're going to talk about something near the end of this conversation that is so incredibly valuable that I really wanted to encourage you to make sure that you're listening to, which is Chris's relationship with his father. It's a very intimate story, and it involves how he has been very intentional with the subject matter of presence because he doesn't have that many more moments left with his dad. I know you're going to enjoy this episode. And before I bring Chris into the conversation, I just want to say thank you for listening to this episode. I want to thank you for being a subscriber to the 360 Experience podcast. If you haven't subscribed, please do. It's how we get great guests to come onto the show, is by having a lot of subscribers. If you like this episode, please give us a like. Please forward it on to somebody else who you think would find it to be valuable. And if you're watching this on YouTube, please make some comments. And without further ado, I introduce you to my dear friend, Chris Ledlie. Leds, what's up, brother?
Hey, Timmy, how are you, buddy?
I'm great, man. It was really nice to spend some time with you yesterday.
It was. That was a good time.
Yeah, thank you again for all your help. Looking forward to this conversation, man. I want to just dive right in so the listeners can get meat and value right out of the gate. I mean, as I said in my intro of you, you've been in this business for a long time. You started in 2002, I believe. And I think, somebody that's been in the business for, 21 years like you have, brings a tremendous amount of value just by sheer experience alone. I mean, it's one thing to read a textbook on things, to listen to podcasts, to go to conferences and to hear theory. And it's an entirely different thing to just go through the experience of having been in the mortgage business through cycles, right? So you obviously were in the business in 2008, 2009, and now we're going through a very, very challenging time here in the latter part of 2023, when this is being recorded, going into 2024. And I think we should just start with what are the things that you're seeing successful originators doing in this market? You lead a lot of people. Maybe you can give us a little bit of a background on how many people are underneath you. I know that number has shrunk due to attrition in the industry. Give us a perspective on how many people you've led ultimately at its peak. Um, and what are you seeing in successful originators right now that are still making loans happen? Let's start there.
Yeah, what a great place to kick it off from. If I go back, I started, like you said, my career in 2002, and I'll just give a quick story about how this had always been a dream of mine, not really to be in the mortgage industry, but I came out to Southern California after I'd finished school at Arizona State to visit a buddy of mine. And I was out for a couple of days, and my dad called and he said, "Hey, what's your plan? When are you coming back to Texas? You got to start looking for a job." And I'm like, "Well, I'm out here. I might live in California. We'll see." And he's like, "As long as you can figure out how to fund it, you're good to go." And so I remember going to the bank and walking up to the teller, and I said to the teller, I was like, I got to check how much money I have in my account. And it was like $330 or $340. And that's all I had to my name. And she looks and she's like, "What's the matter?" And I'm like, "I guess I'm going to have to go back to Texas. I thought I was going to get to hang out here in California for a little bit, but I don't have any money." And my dad basically has cut me off completely. And so I've got to go home and get a job. And she right there on the spot was like, "You should just do mortgage. Those guys look like they're having so much fun. They make a lot of money." And she walked me over and introduced me to somebody that was in mortgage. I ended up talking to him for 20, 30 minutes, and he hired me on the spot. So that's how I got into the business initially. And as we know, that run 2002, 3, 4, 5,
It's a good stretch.
really, really good stretch there to
Yeah.
start the business. And I was surrounded by other great originators that were very abundant. I didn't know it at the time. I just thought this is the way people operated because they just shared. We all collaborated together, celebrated together. And we evolved to where my business grew just as an originator. And then in 2008, obviously we know things came crashing down. So that was my real first time that I faced challenge in the business, like adversity and challenge and like not knowing what to do. And so as I think about the question you asked, right? Like, what was it in that moment, not dissimilar from this moment right now, that caused some of my best years actually to be 11, 12, 13 as we were coming out of that? And a few things happened, and I'm seeing the same thing here: a laser focus on the things you can control, right? And what I mean by that is, I, very similar to originators today, had got this illusion of what my value was based on the production numbers that I had put up in those years, right? Very similar to the 2020, 2021 that originators are feeling now. And so I remember feeling this moment of like, my gosh, am I even in the right business anymore? Like I'm failing miserably. And I shifted my focus to say, okay, what can I do in this moment right now? Where does the opportunity lie? And it literally was just like relentless around the activities that I could control. Very similar to today, what I would say the best of the best are doing. They are focused exclusively on the activities that might not be yielding the same amount of results that they were, 2, 3 years ago, but they know that that is the place that if they spend their energy and time, it's going to set them up for success in the future.
Well said. So, summarization that I'm hearing you say is that we need to change our measuring stick. Um, a market like 2002, 2003, 2004, just as the market of 2020, 21, 22 can create kind of almost a false sense of security as to what this is really all about. Like it's just too easy to the extent that we get conditioned to think that this is how it's always going to be. And it always happens this way. It turns on a dime. I mean, I think this time it happened even more abruptly than in most cases, but it always turns quick and gets bad real quick. Leaves a lot of originators kind of caught in lead boots where they're still measuring their success on how many loans they locked and how many people called them from their past client database proactively, et cetera. And all of a sudden, when that comes to a screeching halt, people start to panic. So when you talk about the things that you can control, I want to dive deeper there because I think this is such an important point that you're making. If we are fixated on the things that we cannot control, we're really setting ourselves up for disappointment, frustration, and fear. But there are things, aren't there, that you can actually control. And if you measure success on those things and kind of create a new definition of success, which our buddy Josh Burris had talked about in my episode with him almost a year ago now, that can shift things and kind of give you a little bit more bounce in your step. So what are some of the things that you are advising the originators that you oversee to focus on right now that they can control? And let's go into the specifics on that.
Yeah. So one of the things, and I got to give Craig Strent credit for this. He implemented years ago with Apex the 40-point tracker. We have re-imaged it and focused it on, okay, what are the things in this very moment in time we can focus on? And a lot of them are, connecting with our past clients, right? Having meaningful conversations, setting the stage for, future opportunity, education around that. Our referral partners, how are we connecting with them? Education for ourselves, right? What are we doing to sharpen our own axe? So it's really the activities, as opposed to, I think about in the years past, it's how many leads do we have coming in? How many fundings do we have? Right. So I'm shifting now to say, let's go back in the stage to the activities that actually are going to lead to those future state.
Okay, so let's drill down a little deeper on that last one, because I don't think this is talked about enough, and I'm a huge believer in it. It's that education piece. So what are some of the things that originators can be doing right now to educate themselves? And before you answer that, what I want to share with those that are with us today is we should not underestimate the psychological component of how we feel about ourselves. I mean, I used to say somewhat curtly as a public speaker many years ago, when you don't know shit. I mean, there's no escaping it. Inside yourself. If you're like, hey, you know what, I'm kind of only half educated here, you're going to have call reluctance, you're going to have resistance, you're not going to feel good about yourself, you're going to have a difficult time having the type of certainty to give advice, et cetera. So as it relates to this topic of educating yourself, what are some things that you're suggesting to originators right now to do to not only become better at your trade, but maybe more importantly, to feel good about your knowledge? Because I think that's a key component.
Yeah, so I would break it down into a couple different categories. One, I think overall financial literacy. The role of the mortgage advisor has evolved so much to where if you're not educating your clients, you're becoming more and more irrelevant, right? You've got a commoditized product. So there's, Barry Abib has a CMA course that's out there. Jabron has CMPS. I think those are great financial literacy courses to help us be able to be confident in the advice and guidance that we're giving broadly to our clients. So that's one pillar of it. The other thing that I think is important, especially in this time right now, is that we're well informed about what's happening in the markets, right? So I make it a common practice that I am, reading about what's going on in the MBS market. I'm reading about what's going on in the economy. I'm reading about what's going on from a social standpoint, right? And I'm not talking about like the news that's going to get me spun out. I'm talking very specific to educate myself so I can have those conversations about why the market is behaving this way. What do we see into the future that's going to happen? So that would be a second pillar. And then the third pillar is, for years I was never the guy that really read books, and it sounds funny to say that now, but like I felt like I was so busy I didn't have time for it. But now with audiobooks and podcasts, what I'll do is I'll make it a part of my routine now when I'm exercising or when I'm out on a walk, that I'm listening to an audiobook or I'm listening to a podcast. And I try to really make that something that is, positive from a mindset or causing me to think in different ways to really expand the way that, my view on, just my life in general is.
So what I'm hearing is the word I just wrote down on my notepad here is a lot of intentionality. Right? Like, so being very intentional with what you allow yourself to take in. And you're right, there's a super razor thin fine line between taking in content that's going to spin you out and bum you out. At the time of this recording, we're 6 days into the war in Israel with Hamas. It's really easy to go down that rabbit hole. I don't, under any circumstances, want to come off as insensitive and say you shouldn't take in that content. I'm saying that take in the amount of that content that is necessary for you to feel informed, to feel compassionate and empathetic to the situation, but not anything more than that, because before you know it, it can just consume you, can't it? I mean, like during the early days of the pandemic.
Yeah. You and I were actually having a conversation about this. We just need to be aware of the impact the content that we're absorbing has on us, right? And if we get finished with it and it creates this almost like an irritation or a frustration, take note of that, right? Like, hey, maybe this isn't healthy for me. This isn't serving me. And so that for me has been really healthy. And not to pivot too much, but social media was something like that for me. I found that I would kind of get entangled in it. And then when I would get finished, I wouldn't feel better. Like it was something I actually felt like, gosh, I just wasted time. I'm more triggered easily now. So like I've been very, very intentional in noting the things that I'm consuming, what the impact is to me, mentally and physically.
Okay, I want to go a little deeper on both these topics. So the first is the consumption, the intentional consumption of content associated with our industry, such as
Mhm.
MBS Highway. You mentioned CMPS. You mentioned learning about mortgage-backed securities. And then I want to talk about some of the podcasts and books that you read from a mindset perspective. But let's start with, the content, that pertains to this industry. So what's the actionable components to that? Like it's one thing to, listen to Barry's, morning market update, which is certainly, incredibly valuable. It's another thing to, get your CMPS certification and taking Gibran's content as an example, and the CMA content from Barry. But what do you then do with the absorption of that content to use it as a valuable catalyst in your business? Is there anything in particular that you suggest as it relates to that?
Yeah, I love that. So I'm going to approach it from two different angles. One, my role as a leader in engaging with my loan officers. And in that capacity, what I'm finding myself doing is I'm having informative conversations with them. And it'll be more like, hey, I just want to learn what your take is on this. And so it helps me gauge what their ability is to actually communicate or articulate this to their, referral partners and to their clients. And so it's from an education standpoint, I am transferring knowledge through, the things that I'm taking in to them, which helps solidify it for me, my deeper understanding of it. The loan officer, the originator side, it's the same thing. I'm asking them to go out and have conversations with their clients, educate them, ask them questions, teach on this to your referral partners. That's the best way to really, really have this be a concrete understanding is you go out and you teach this to somebody else.
That's such a key part of it because again, if you're just taking in the content but you're not developing the skills to communicate it, to articulate it, and you use it
Mhm.
as a value proposition, then it is to some extent almost a waste. I mean, your wisdom is being, withheld rather than delivered. So, you guys practice on each other a lot, don't you?
Yeah.
Tell us a
So
little bit about that and game film and those types of things, because I think that's super important for people to hear.
Yeah, so at Neo, one of the core kind of ethos of who we are is around collaboration. And I share with you the group that I originally, when I got into the industry, I just thought that was normal, that everybody collaborated, celebrated, bounced ideas off of each other. And then I found out, wow, this industry is really siloed. People are very, very, scarce about their ideas and think that nobody else has anything out there and they're not going to share it. And that never landed with me. And so when we came together with, the group at Neo, one of the things that I saw was these guys are all abundant teachers and we get better by, Ryan coming and sharing his view or the way he approaches something, Josh and Danny and Mark doing the same thing. And what happened was all of a sudden, it wasn't just one of us that was teaching and sharing. The community, the rest of our originators started saying, hey, I took what you guys did and I tried it, but I put this little spin on it and I recorded it when I was talking to my client. So we'll send that out and we'll share that within the community. And it's really powerful because a couple things happen out of that. One, we all get better because we're learning from one another and we're up leveling our approach. But the other thing is, it's one of those things that for the person watching that content, they're like, oh, wow, I could do that. Like,
Yeah, yeah.
that's possible, right? So it's almost that 4 minute mile thing, right? Once we see it done, it becomes possible. And they're looking at like, not in a condescending way, but I'm like, oh, if that person can do it, I can do it, right? And so it creates this pull that it pulls the community to all get better together.
Yeah, so I think that, everyone joining us in this conversation should give serious consideration to how do I how do I take this information associated with the market? First of all, how do I make sure that I'm tapped into this information? I mean, that's number one. You have to have these tools. And then number two is once you're absorbing this content and carving out a certain amount of time on a daily basis to take it in the morning before your day gets crazy, what are you then doing with it to practice the um, the application of it? And some of that can be exactly what you said. I mean, I used to. I'll break it down into a much more rudimentary way because I go way back before there was Zoom calls, but I go sit in some of my loan originators' offices back in the day when I had my own mortgage company, and if I had a spare 15 to 30 minutes and they were on a call, I'd go in and listen with a yellow legal pad on my lap, and I'd take notes of things that they were saying. Oh, that's a great line right there. I'm going to insert that. I mean, that's how you get better. But in today's day and age, I mean, that's a very brilliant strategy, which is, hey, let's make sure that we're recording our sessions when we're consulting with clients and sharing it with each other so we can learn from each other. So that's fantastic. Anything you want to add before we pivot to the mindset stuff?
No, let's pivot.
Okay, so as it relates to the content that you're taking in on your morning walks, when you're working out, we'll get into your morning routine in a little bit because I know you're a big advocate of that. What's the what's the stuff that you feel is healthy for you? Give us an idea as to the types of books that you're listening to and reading and the types of podcasts.
Yeah, what's been interesting is it's a constant evolution depending on where I am at a given time, right? And that can be on the personal side, that can be on the business side. And here through the environment that we're in now, I'm finding that it's a lot of mindset, right? It's a lot of, how do I shut out the negative noise and make sure that like the things that I'm feeding up here, right? Like one of my favorite quotes is the quote that goes, watch your thoughts, they become your words become your actions become your behavior becomes your character, and your character becomes your destiny, right? So I got to watch what's going on up here very, very first if I'm going to control the way I'm coming across to everybody else, the way that I'm, feeling about myself. And so during this time, I found a lot of the things that I'm consuming are really around what can I do to sharpen that skill. Obviously I love your podcast. You've got, some great friends of mine that are on that I get insight about them that I didn't even know, things like that is really cool to see. And then, people that I've never met that you've had on. So I really, really like the way that you approach, having conversations with people that I respect. I like Ed Milet. He's been a great one. Always has some really, really good guests on his shows. But from a book standpoint, I'll give you one right now that really, really has resonated recently. It's called The Gap and the Gain by Dan Sullivan. And the concept in this book is, we are at a given point in time and we have this destination that we think we want to get to. That's the gain. That's the gap, right? Where we are today and where we want to get to. But we've also come from somewhere, and that's the gain that we've made. Too often what we're focused on is the gap where we're trying to get. And, once I get to this place, I'll be happy. Once I achieve this status, then that's the point that I can celebrate. And as you know, and, we've seen in our lives, that goalpost always moves. And if it's really just about the destination that we're focused on, it's a life of misery. It's a life of letdown. And so this helped me reframe in an easy way to think about, look back and celebrate what we've accomplished. And it's not dissimilar from, we started talking about the 40-point tracker, finding the wins that we have. When I focus on the gain, I look back, I'm like, my gosh, like, look at all that I've accomplished. And I'm sitting here whining or complaining about the fact that I just need to get this much further, but I've come this far. And so that concept in The Gap in the Game was one that really resonated with me recently.
Mark Robertson told me about that book. I have yet to read it. When you go back to the contemplation that you listened to last week in Park City at the retreat, that's what Sam Harris was talking about, which is we're always stepping over the present moment to try to find that destination in the future where we could be happy. But if we're constantly always stepping over the present moment, the present moment is where happiness exists. I mean, right now. And what I love about what you're saying is you're saying, let's just stop right now and reflect backwards on all that we have accomplished. And what that gives you is confidence and some momentum and some belief that there is a future waiting for you that can be manifest. However, it can only be manifest with the things, going back to the very first thing you said, that you can control right now. So like being fixated on the present moment and things that you can control right now are going to get you to the future that you want to be at. But if we're constantly always striving for something in the future, we're going to be frustrated. I love that. So, and I love the fact that you brought up Ed Milet. I've listened to some of his podcasts. That's a great one. I think that right now, feeding our mind with positive thoughts is of paramount importance. I mean, this is a game that the market we're in right now can only be won between our ears, period. Like that's where the game is being played. What is your mindset? What is your energy? What are you allowing yourself to focus on? What are you getting out of your purview? You know, we talked about this again last week in Park City about the seductions and the distractions. What are the things that kind of, you know, draw you down that rabbit hole, that mess you up, that get you into a negative tailspin? So identifying those things right now, and those include not just, you know, political events and things that are happening in the economy, but also that fixation on an old belief system that it's about how many loans I locked this week. You know, we need to become a master of our thought processes. So let's talk about your morning routine a little bit, because it feels like it's the right time to go into that, because we're kind of tiptoeing around it. So how do you start your day? What's your belief about a morning routine? Do you have an evening routine as well? I mean, what are you doing to set yourself up for success and win this battle between the ears that we're talking about?
Yeah, so I would say that this is the single most transformational thing that I've done in my life. And I know that sounds like a very, very bold statement, but to sum it up, I've recognized that the way I start my day, and if I optimize my mindset and my energy, I'm going to show up throughout the day as such a more effective, such a more influential, such a more fulfilled individual. And so I look at it and I'm like, okay, well, what are those things that are going to lead to me getting into an optimized state? And the first introduction that I had to this was a book I read by Hal Elrod called The Miracle Morning. And to really, really boil it down, his process is a acronym: SAVERS. S for silence, A for affirmation, V for visualization, E for exercise, R for reading, and S for scribing or journaling. And when I first did this, I really, really leaned in heavily, and I was like, okay, I'm going to do all these things, and I'm just going to commit to doing this for, 30 days. And it was a ton of work. Like, I remember getting up and just being like, I don't really want to do this, but I said, I'm going to commit to doing this for 30 days. And so I did it for 30 days, followed the exact process with each one of those different areas. And after 30 days, I was like, okay, I tried that. That worked pretty well, but I don't know if this is for me. And I remember specifically that next Monday that I did not follow the routine. Tuesday, I didn't follow it. And I felt the way that I felt, like my energy just shifted. I was way shorter. I was not as efficient, and I was way more reactive in my day. And I was like, holy shit, there's something to this, because I had gone back to my day to where I just picked my phone up first thing. I started checking emails and the wheels started spinning, but not in a good direction. And so what evolved from that is, and if I look at my morning routine from when I first started, 8-10 years ago doing that to now, it's changed based on what I need at that time, and me constantly checking in to see, okay, what is the most impactful to align me to that most optimal state that I can have in a day. So today, right now, my morning routine consists of this. I wake up, first thing I do is hydration. It's funny. I remember Ryan Grant telling me about it. I'm like, hydration. I'm like, well, just grab a cup of coffee. Why do I need hydration? And I started doing it. It was one of those things. Now, if I don't do it, I notice a difference. I'm tighter. I'm not as clear. My energy does not get up and going as quickly. So I hydrate first thing. Then I'll go into breath work. I follow kind of the Wim Hof breath work. And that's one that I would have never thought that for me would have been something that was powerful, but there's something about it just energizes my body, but it calms my mind. So it's a strange combination, right? So body is energized, mind is calm, and then I go into meditation from there. I'll do anywhere, depending on the time I have, anywhere from a 10 to 20-minute meditation. From there, I'll go into gratitude, just 3 simple things, which I learned from you. What are 3 things you're grateful for? And I had introduced at one time, what's something I'm proud of myself for? And we can talk about that. I won't derail too much, but I've struggled, a lot of my life with feeling like I'm enough, feeling like I'm worthy. And so that was a powerful process that's helped me, overcome and work to get better in that area. From there, I have to move, right? I have to get some sort of exercise in. So to do that entire morning routine, if I have the optimal amount of time, I'm probably 2 hours or so. But what I recognize is when I travel, mornings that I've got to get up and have an early meeting, I would make the excuse, shit, I don't have time to do it. So I do nothing, right? And I would set myself off. So what I've created as well is a super abbreviated version. If I can only do a couple key things, what are those things, right? And it's, I got to do my breath work. I want to sit and get some silence. So even if it's a 2 to 3 minute meditation, and then I want to make sure that I get some movement in as well. So I'll go out, I'll go for a quick jog. I'll do something to get cardio just to get my heart pumping. If I do that, my consistency in this carries me through even on those days that I have maybe a less of a focus on that morning routine.
Yeah, I'm a little confused about something you shared because in that 2 hour stretch, you haven't gone to the bathroom yet. How do you hold it that long?
I did leave that key part out. Thanks, Tim. I need to write that down on my list.
So, no, in all seriousness, there are a couple things that I want to make sure that we don't skip over that I think are really powerful that you said. One is I love this idea of 2 different morning routines. That's brilliant. Like the long version and then the abbreviated version. We're all going to have those days where, we wake up a little later than we wanted to because maybe we went out and had a couple of glasses of wine the night before or whatever, just stayed up later than we normally do. And I've never thought of that before. I mean, I'm pretty strong morning routine too, but I don't have a backup morning routine. When the alarm, I sleep through the alarm, right? And I mean, I try to get up around 5:30, but like what happens when I get up at 6:30 and I'm like, oh man, I'm compressed on time. I kind of leave it to my own devices to figure out what I'm going to fit in rather than having a plan for, okay, these are the things that are my absolute must-dos. So excellent teaching there. Tell me about,
let me
yeah.
just say something why that for me was so important. I was judging myself very negatively that, oh, you didn't get your morning routine and you failed this morning. And so when I would just leave it to say, okay, well, let me try to do these things, it was like I was half-assing it because it wasn't intentional. By me creating that, it's already part of the plan. So I was way less hard on myself. And I was like, no, this is going to happen from time to time. I have a plan for this and I just go to it. So it's also a mental piece for me as well.
Yeah, the half-assing it part, I'm really glad that you bring that up. My experience has been, I'm curious if this has been your experience, is that there are times where I'll do my morning routine, but I'm just checking the boxes. Like I'm just kind of going through the motions. Like, yeah, I'll write down my 3 things that I'm grateful for. I'll write down 3 things that I'm proud of about myself. I'll do my meditation, but I'm not really in it. And it's always when I'm trying to cram too much in to a short window of time. So it's like I'm rushing through it. So it becomes a quantity over quality thing. Have you ever had that experience?
Yeah. And that's what led to me putting together this abbreviated version, because I was like, okay, I at least got to just get it in. And I was so distracted from it. It actually was counterproductive, right? Because I was being really hard on myself doing it, thinking about all the things I needed to get to. So by creating that abbreviated version, I know that I can give it, like I can get that done in 15 minutes, 20 minutes. I know that I can make that much time no matter what.
So the hydration part and the breathing part, I want to circle back to that for a second. So when you say that you hydrate yourself, I'd like you to share exactly what you do to hydrate yourself. A lot of people don't realize that actually caffeine dehydrates you.
Right.
So that's a really big thing. I listen to a lot of Andrew Huberman podcasts.
Love Huberman,
Yeah, the Huberman Lab is great, very science-based. The Wim Hof breathing, I don't do Wim Hof breathing, but I do another type of breathing technique. I mean, absolutely, that oxygenates your blood. I mean, think about it. You hydrate a dehydrated body, and then you oxygenate your blood. Those 2 things alone have to set you up to have better mental acuity, better energy levels, to where you have a little bit more bounce in your step. Tell us a little bit more about what you do to hydrate yourself, and then do a little demo on Wim Hof breathing for us so we can all watch you.
I will answer the first question. I will not do the second one.
Okay.
I'll describe it though. So from a hydration standpoint, for a long time, what I would do is I would just get a glass of water the night before. I'd put it in like, one of those workout bottles or whatever, set it by my nightstand. And when I would wake up in the morning, I'd drink probably, 20, 24 ounces of water. But what I found, I had somebody introduce to me a product called Relight, Relyte. And what I really love about this, it's electrolytes and it's salts, but there's no sugar in it. There's no carbs in it. And so what it does is like an extreme hydration. So I'll take that in the morning. I'll do, 16, 18 ounces of that first thing in the morning, to really, again, to what you described, like it is such a needed thing. When we sleep, our bodies dehydrate as well. And if the first thing we're putting in is caffeine, we're dehydrating it even more, right? So that for me, I won't have coffee until later in the morning, like after I finish my workout, that sort of thing. So that's the hydration routine. Then when I go to the gym, I'll do another 20 ounces or so on my way to the gym of this electrolyte powder. Any other question on that, or you want me to go into
No, keep going.
Wim Hof breath work is?
Yeah.
Okay, so The Wim Hof, for those of you that haven't seen or heard of him, they call him the Iceman, right? And so he's basically shown these extreme things that your body can do and conditions that your body can withstand, and really the power of breath work. A lot of us have seen, like, if you need to calm yourself down, if you're nervous or you're stressed, like slowing down and taking deep breaths will do it. Box breathing is another thing. So Wim Hof is an interesting concept, and so essentially what you do is you take 30 deep inhale, exhale, and at a pretty rapid rate. And then on the last one, you take as deep a breath as you can and you exhale that breath all the way out and you hold your breath. On that first round, I'll hold it about a minute and a half or so. And then you take a deep breath in, hold, and what you're doing is you're oxygenating your blood at that point, and then you release. And so I'll do 3 cycles of that. And what's interesting is you almost get a little tingle sensation that goes over your body and your head. And then when you take that deep breath in to re-oxygenate, there's something that just settles and calms the body at that point. That last round, so on the third round, I mean, I can hold my breath, 2 minutes and 45 seconds, which for me,
Wow.
like, I was like, never thought that would be something that I had the actual capacity to do.
Wow, that's amazing. Thanks for describing that. Yeah, and for those that don't know anything about Wim Hof breathing, you could definitely go to YouTube and find all kinds of his videos where he demonstrates that type of a breathing technique. Um, I would imagine I want to transition back into business now. It feels like a good segue because what we've done here is we started in business and then we've gone into the personal realm. But as I said, right now the game is one between the ears. It's one with mindset. It's one with energy management. And you've just described a couple of things, or a few things, in fact, that have a huge impact on mindset and energy management. Everything from the content you take in to the way you oxygenate your blood, to the way you hydrate your body, to the way you get into movement to start your day. And one of the things that I've always admired about you is your temperament. Like, I feel like from a leadership perspective, you're pretty calm, cool, and collected. You're an even temperament guy, which I think really serves you well, especially in stressful situations. So tell us a little bit about how maybe this morning routine of yours has transitioned now into your workday and what positive impacts it's had there.
Great question. So one of the things that I recognize, from a leadership standpoint, that's incredibly important is that I need to be somebody that is we've used that word, beacon of light for the people around us, right? I don't want to show up as that person that, I get around the team and they're like, man, that was rough. Chris must be having a tough day. So for me, it's always been something important that I want to show up with such great energy that people walk away and they're like, I feel better because I was around him. I'm more energized, I'm more motivated. And so if I'm not taking care of myself first, then how am I going to show up for others in the way that they need me to be there? And, when I think about, what are the things that I work on with leaders as I'm helping them grow in their own journey of leadership, that's the first thing I always talk to them about. Like, take care of yourself first. The old, on the plane, put your oxygen mask on first. If you're not taking care of yourself, how can you show up as the best version of yourself and give your team what your team needs?
Thank you for that. I needed to hear that. I've been going through a little bit of a stressful time lately myself, and I don't think that I'm showing up as an A-plus player with my temperament in that regard. I think that my teammates have probably felt my stressed out energy at times. So that kind of hit me right between the eyes, and it's incredibly powerful. And for those of you that are saying, well, but I don't lead anybody, I mean, I'm down to like sharing a processor or something like that. No. I mean, this is transcendent into like how you're showing up for your family. It's transcendent into when you do have interactions with prospective clients and referral partners. What energy are they feeling from you? Are they feeling an energy that they're drawn to, or are they feeling an energy that they're repelled by? I mean, so if you want to get straight to the heart of the matter, I mean, a successful originator in today's market has a cool head, is managing their temperament and their energy, and is that beacon of light and that magnet to others that they're drawing into their life. So very, very well said. I know that you're very passionate about the subject matter of originators that see the world as entrepreneurs versus employees. And
Um,
I want to unpack that a little bit because it's interesting because I got, my entire career I was always a mortgage broker. So I think in the mortgage broker world, you are typically more mentally conditioned to think like an entrepreneur. At least I was. I mean, I didn't have anybody doing anything for me. I mean, I had very little support from the companies that I worked for. And then I started my own company. And then, of course, I was a true entrepreneur in that regard. And I feel like in markets like this, those that have an entrepreneurial mindset excel more than ones that don't, because the ones that don't almost have a little bit of a victim mentality. They're like, they're complaining all the time about what their company's not doing for them and those types of things. So I'd like you to share a little bit about the importance of an entrepreneurial mindset, especially in today's market.
Yeah, I'm glad you went here because this is something that really I am forming my whole thought and teaching process around this. And this market is what's really brought it to light. And yes, what you described in the broker world, a lot of that community has had to operate independently without the resources and support around them, and so they have had to be entrepreneurial. The typical retail loan officer has been treated as an employee for years. And I'll give you a couple ways that I would describe that. So you think about a loan officer thinking about a company they're going to join. The first thing they're looking for is how much of a signing bonus can I get? What's the maximum amount of comp that I can get? Can I get a marketing budget? Are they going to hire my whole team? Can I get this office that they're going to pay for? It's all about, let me get everything that I can get right now in this moment, versus the entrepreneurial mindset is, okay, what can we do to set ourselves up for success 1 year, 3 year, 5 years into the future? That's going to require us to prepare. That's going to require us to have a vision of what that looks like. You think about even the business planning. For years as a loan officer, here's what my business planning looked like. How much money do you want to make? How many loans does that mean you need to fund? How many leads does that mean you need to get? Can you imagine if a company ran, like an entrepreneur ran their business that way? No, an entrepreneur starts with, what's our vision? Where are we going? Why are we doing this? What's our just cause? Where do we want to be 10 years from now? What makes us unique? What are our priorities over the next year? What are our priorities over the next quarter? Far, far different approach. So you come into an environment like we're in right now that is incredibly challenging. It's one of those things, everybody has a plan until you get punched in the face, right? This is the market that punched you in the face. The loan officer employee mentality is literally scared to death right now, turning every direction, looking for any life raft to help them, any shiny object. The entrepreneurial minded loan officer, business owner, has said, okay, I knew that times like this were going to come. We have a plan in place for what we're going to do. I got to stay the course because here's where we're going.
And I'll add, and this is a great topic, so I want to spend more time here. And an entrepreneurial mindset sees the opportunities in a market like this. They see that there is opportunity to capture market share. They see that there is opportunity to create something new that will be a springboard for their business in the future. I've shared this many times, so I'm a bit redundant, but I mean, it was in 94 that I developed a database management strategy that I started sharing with the mortgage industry in 95. I think was one of the first originators that was doing that. And then in 99, I developed the perfect loan process. So the two things that I'm most known for were developed in markets like this, because I had an entrepreneurial mindset. Like I instead of looking around for the life raft, which I love that metaphor that you just gave, I was looking for, okay, what do I need to do to create the future that I have as my vision and my goal? And it's interesting. I mean, let's talk about it from the perspective of what kind of looking in the rearview mirror, what happened, in the last 18 months. I think that there are a lot of people that were not entrepreneurial and therefore were not ready to right size as a result of thinking like an employee. Do you want to speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, Tim, I was one of them. As much as I thought that I had it all figured out, I first started running a P&L in 2010, something like that, 2011.
Okay.
Never had a down quarter, whether I was a branch manager, whether I was an area manager, or a regional manager, a divisional manager, and literally 2022 happened, and it was one of those things that kept coming and kept coming. And by the time I was making the decision, I was already way, way behind the next decision that I needed to make. And I'll share a story. We started Neo at the end of 2020, and early in 2021, let's call it March or so, Dave Savage had set up a mastermind for us to go out and network with some other leaders of companies. We went out actually to Churchill and out in Tennessee, and there were a number of other groups there. And we thought we couldn't lose, basically. I remember sitting in that room, and we were the young guns that were like, we're going to take this industry over. Nothing's going to slow us down. We got market tailwinds behind us now. We're ready to run. And Mike Hardwick is the CEO of.
I know Mike really well, and
yeah,
I know Jim and Mike really well.
yeah, two great guys. And
Great guys. Yes.
So Mike's sitting across the room from us, and he's like, boys, I want to tell you a story. And we're like, oh, here he goes. Wonder what this old guy's going to say. Kind of laughing about it. He's like, you got to have a break glass plan. He goes, there will be a time that will come that you're going to have to make some really, really tough decisions. And if you haven't thought out what those decisions look like, and you're trying to make them in that moment when it's so emotionally charged, you're going to be incredibly slow to react, and it could end up compromising and taking your whole business down. And what that means is you have to say, what happens if we get to this place in the market? What decisions are we going to make? Are we going to reduce our team? Are we going to reduce expenses? Are we going to stop investing in this area? Well, what happens if it gets 20% worse than that and 20% worse than that? And I remember, and again, it's almost embarrassing to say this. I remember us being like, we're just going to work our way through it. Trust me, we can outgrow it. We can outrun it with volume. Like we got the energy and grit. We're just going to grind, and we'll get past it. We're not going to be those companies that have to lay people off. And trust me, it is incredibly painful to have to go through that. But the lessons that I learned through 2022 of what it requires to be a true entrepreneur and understand what does that break glass moment mean, we're still in those times right now, and we're having to act on some of those plans that I thought we would never, ever have to act on. And it's fucking painful. It is really, really painful, but it almost is one of those things that we said, okay, if we ever got to this point, here's the action we have to take. It sucks, but this is the plan that we put in place. That's what an entrepreneur does.
Yes. And it's interesting. We have a lot of friends, you and I, that are entrepreneurs, and by definition, they own their own companies, or they did at least. Craig Strent, built Apex up to a very successful company. I mean, he's an entrepreneur by nature. Him and Eric Gates,
Mm-hmm.
Steve Grossman, another entrepreneur, that has run businesses. Brent Hicks has run businesses, and I've run many myself. And what I'm acutely aware of is that an entrepreneur, by definition, has to, and I want to tie this into everybody that's listening that's just an originator, because you may be thinking we're just talking about company owner, but we're not. And I want to make sure we tie this down. But an entrepreneur is somebody who is not looking for that life raft or that safety net, that is taking full and total responsibility for the growth of their business and the protection of their people and the health and well-being of their business in any market. They're thinking constantly strategically, as you point out, into the future, and in deploying what Josh Burris had said to us. Josh Burris came to us in early spring, and he said, what if the mortgage-backed security market doesn't rally in the spring, like everyone was predicting that it would? And what if May 10th isn't this day where we have this big, correction back in our favor? That's an entrepreneurial mindset. That's a mindset of thinking about what's around every corner and not getting complacent. And that's what originators need to be doing right now. Whether you're a solo originator, whether you're a branch manager, whether you're a division president, it doesn't matter what you are, and whether or not you get a W-2 or a 1099, and whether your sign's on the your name's on the sign on the door, or whatever the case may be. You still need to always be thinking strategically, 3 steps ahead. What am I going to do if this happens? What am I going to do if that happens? What would you add to that?
Yeah. So you heard me describe, what do we do when summer turns to winter? I absolutely believe that this is a moment right now that we need to be preparing for what happens when winter turns to spring, right? And like, what are we going to, and we talked about this a little bit earlier, what are the opportunities in this moment that are going to set us up for success in the next evolution of our business? Now, I think this is where having those conversations with our teams is incredibly important. And for those of you that are not actively talking with your teams about, like, guys, we need to be prepared when this market does turn. What is our plan around this? Let's go ahead and have everything in place so we're able to execute on it. And it's a powerful thing for two reasons. One, you're not going to get caught on your heels, because at some point things will turn. I'm not talking about having hope as a plan. I'm talking about having a plan in place for when it happens. So you will have your plan. But the second thing is, our team needs that, right? They need to know, like, oh, wait a minute, there is going to be, a springtime that's going to come around, and it's fun for them to plan on that. You also can see, like, with your team, what is the vision for them? What do they want to do? They want to take on a bigger role, right? Like, when this turns, like, what is the vision for you? How can you help this team be more successful? And so I think that right there is a way that you can engage your team, whether it be just a production partner, whether it be your processor on there, whether you have an organization that you're running. I think having those conversations with a plan in place is the other side of the coin, that a lot of people right now have been so beat down that they're like, I'm not even going to go down that path. That's a fantasy world. That's not going to happen. And that's a huge, huge miss. Like a really, really.
Yes. Yeah, it is. And they don't want to get their hopes up and be disappointed again, right? And I'm so glad you're bringing this up, because I'll be the first one to admit that I've been wanting to talk about this for a little while now, but have been holding back for that reason, that I'm like fearful that people are going to perceive the conversation as being some, pie in the sky, rah, rah moment. But if I'm an originator right now, I am doing exactly what you just described with my team. So a couple of quick stories associated with this to really hammer it home. So it was 2000. Yeah, it was late 2000. And Stephen Marshall and I, he was owner of a mortgage brokerage company at the time too, we're having a bottle of wine together at our Achieving Leadership Excellence event run by Todd Duncan and Daniel Harkavy. And it's just two of us. And it was, I think, November of 2020. And we're like, what would, and it was tough. I mean, rates were like 8.75%. Like, it was slow. I mean, we were surviving, but slow. But we're like, what do we need to do to be ready for when rates get better? And let's just pretend that rates dropped by 0.75% tomorrow. What would we do? And we sat up until 2 o'clock in the morning planning it out. And it involved us, now I'm dating myself here, but pulling all of the old files out of storage, having our processors and whoever we have as an able body going through them and making needs memorandums on what the file is missing, getting the ones that would be able to be refied, if rates were to drop 0.75% or a percentage point or whatever, getting them ready, getting all those people that had like a 5-1 arm that had only 2 years left ready. Well, the weird thing that happened was that on like January the 4th or something like that, the Fed did not have a scheduled meeting. They just abruptly, Greenspan called an abrupt meeting, and they lowered by 50 basis points, and the market just completely rallied. And everybody else was left standing in lead boots. I'm like, nobody knew what to do. I mean, Stephen and I already had the files ready to go. I mean, we had gigantic months in February, March, and April, huge funding months when everyone else is trying to figure out how to get a hold of everybody. We were funding 50, 60, 70 loans a month because we were ready for it. The other thing that I want to share is that right now is the time, if your team has extra time, and most of them do, and this is a part of your job as an entrepreneur and a leader, you rally your team, you go, look, like, we need to roll our sleeves up. Everybody needs to expand their job description a little bit right now. I want everybody on this team, and I did this twice in my career, we're all going to call 3 people a day in our past client database to start the day and say hello and connect with them. So, and I would just tell them the truth. Like, I need you to do this for our future, and I need you to do this to secure your job. Like, I need to be maximizing the human resources that I have right now. So if, as an originator right now, you should have your team doing that with you. Do it, make it a fun contest. Again, it's not about getting deals. This is a part back to the beginning of our discussion, that are those 40-point blocking and tackling things, reaching out and connecting with the things, the people that you can, and controlling the things that you can. But if you don't have your teammates calling your past clients right now, you're making a mistake. Anything you'd like to comment on that?
So what I love about that, Tim, is, as a processor or as a production partner, LOA, a lot of times they feel helpless in times like this, powerless. Like, just got to rely on the loan officer. And when the loan officer creates opportunities, then I'll get to work, I'll do my job. And that's a really, really defeating feeling. But if you empower them and you say, hey, listen, we all can make an impact right now. We all can turn opportunity right now. And here's how we're going to do it. Now, all of a sudden, they feel like they can be the solution. They don't feel helpless. They feel empowered to actually be able to contribute in a meaningful way, and fulfillment levels go up. These are really tough times for our teams right now, and their energy tanks are drained. Their sense of fulfillment is drained right now. They're scared for their jobs. Put them on task and empower them in that way. The benefit to them is unbelievable. And then what they'll be able to help your team in this time do is going to create opportunity.
Yeah, when rates did drop, I had my team coming to me literally every day going, hey, so-and-so called and you were on the phone. So, they asked to talk to me and they want a refi right now. Can you get on that? Like the clients called them because they had called the clients to touch base with them 3 months before and say hello to them. So this is a time for a team effort. And to your point, your job as a leader, and we're going to transition to a little bit more to leadership here in a second, but your job as a leader is to create a clear vision of where we're going and to empower people to fulfill that vision. So if you're not creating clarity as to what the objectives and goals are and plugging people into the fulfillment of those objectives, you're definitely doing the wrong thing. Recruiting. That's a hot topic right now. I mean, there are a lot of people that are in movement. You have a lot of experience with recruiting. I want you to talk about recruiting from two perspectives, if you would. Number one, please address, for those that are tuning into this, what are some of your philosophies on how to recruit? Because I'm sure there are people that are listening that want to get better at their recruiting strategy. And then secondly is from the perspective of the originator who is being recruited. And there's a lot of that going on right now, like heavy-handed recruiting in some cases. What do you want to be looking out for if you're not happy with where you are, so you can make a sound decision and the right choice?
Yeah, I love this. I'll go back. A previous company I was at, we had an initiative, and it was to hire 900 people in a year's time, and it wasn't a just put anybody in a seat, but it was so focused and incentivized that I think I compromised actually bringing on people that were aligned with where I can add value and aligned with the way that I want to do business. And I looked up at, a year and a half later, and I looked across the landscape, and I wasn't proud of the growth that we had had. And it was really, really draining the amount of energy that I was having to put into the leadership side of it, because I had brought people on that actually just weren't aligned. And so I think the first thing that I would say is somebody's looking to recruit is you need to understand what type of loan officer is going to be a good cultural fit and a good alignment with your organization and your leadership style. So I think about a branch manager right now, and we hear it all the time. Branch manager says, hey, I want to start recruiting and bringing people in. Well, what kind of loan officer do you want to bring in? Do you want somebody that you're going to help them structure every deal? Do you want somebody that you're going to have to coach them in business development, how to go out and generate business? Do you want somebody that's a great producer already, but they just want a good culture to collaborate in? And I think if you don't get clear about that first, and you're just hiring because, oh, this person does volume, what ends up happening is it's a mismatch, and it's not a win for the person you bring on, and it's not a win for you. So I think defining your value proposition first, and like who would be a good fit to be on your team, would be the number one thing I would say to somebody looking to recruit.
Well said. So let's drill down a little deeper on that. So what I'm hearing you say is, and I would say, by the way, that one of the things that's always been fascinating to me is that the subject matter of recruiting loan originators is not really any different than the subject matter of pursuing realtors. I mean, it's really quite identical, right? So this applies to an originator who's listening to this that wants to synthesize and get really clear on a strategy for cultivating a few more referral partner relationships. You got to get really clear on your avatar. Like, who is this person? How do they operate in the world? What's their personality type? What needs do they have? And what value proposition do I bring that I can fulfill those needs? Like, the biggest mistake, of course, as you just said, is you get somebody to say yes, and then 90 days in, you come to the conclusion that what we offer isn't what they want.
Yeah.
And that holds true again for real estate agents. So the follow-up question is, what's your process for identifying that? And do you use personality profiling in any way? Do you disc assess people as an example to make sure it's a good fit? And speak to your disc a little bit. Like, I'd like to maybe have you infuse into this answer like your awareness of who you are as a leader and the type of people that are and are not a good fit for you.
Yeah. Okay. I love this. So the process that I really go through is I need to understand myself and who do I enjoy being around, what gives me energy when I'm leading or coaching that I'm doing. And for me personally, I love helping people that have a vision of growth. I love helping people that want to get better. I love helping people that are great collaborators and that want to share and have a sense of community. And so when I think about that, that's one of the first things I'm doing is I'm going in and having a conversation with somebody. Talk to me. What is it that you want to do in this next chapter? You're considering making a move. Why is it that you're leaving your company? But what is it that you want to achieve? And if the person comes like, our company has shitty rates, and like there's no product here and things like that. I'm like, oh, they could be somebody that would be a good fit, but if that's the primary thing that they're focused on, I'm just going to disappoint them too, right? Like they're never going to have that fulfilled because there'll always be somebody with a better rate out there. There'll always be somebody with a product that they don't have. And so I don't just walk away from it, but I'll just, I'll go deeper from there, right? So, okay, well, let's just say that we had the best rate and the best product. Is that all you need? Like, what is it you really, really want to achieve? So I want to get to know somebody and what their vision is. And that allows me to help them then identify and settle into those pillars. So if somebody describes to me, I feel like I've just been held back in my company, I feel like that there's no leadership here, there's no direction of the company. And, I'm going to ask, well, why is that important to you? Right. So what I'm trying to get them to do is anchor into this is my foundational pillar around why I'm making a decision. Because during the recruiting process, what will happen is most companies are going to go out there and they're going to throw a shiny object or a signing bonus or tell them that we've got the best technology in the world and it's going to get, their eyes are going to glaze over and they're going to forget, wait a minute, the reason I'm making a change is because I'm not fulfilled, I'm not supported, I'm not, I don't feel aligned with the organization. So what I do in those moments is I have them anchor in and I say, hey, listen, I've seen this process can really take a lot out because you're trying to make the best decision for your business, for your family, for your future. And in that, you're completing due diligence and talking to a number of people. The advice I want to give you right now is you've really been, great in sharing with me what's important to you. I want you not to forget this moment where you said to me the most important thing that you're making your decision around is you want a company that has community, you want a company that has great leadership, that has vision, and that's going to help you grow. And I want you to bounce all of your decisions off of that. I want you to put it through that filtration process as the number one thing, because the product, the price, the compensation, that all can change and that will change. So if you make your decision primarily based off that, you will be making a move again in the next year to 3 years.
Wow, I'm really glad I asked that question. That was absolutely brilliant scripting. What I heard you do is not only reflect back to the person what they shared was important to them based upon you asking a lot of open-ended questions. Again, you can apply all of this to pursuing a realtor as an example. But beyond that, what I heard you do is almost create a verbal contract with that person, which says that, look, these are the things that you have put your stake in the ground on that are important to you. And I don't want you to get seduced by other things in your evaluation process. So when you can show that person that you can fulfill those things that are important to them, it almost becomes irrefutable that you're the place that they should land. Really, really great scripting there, bro. What about from a recruit's perspective? If you could share some wisdom about what somebody who's thinking about making a move right now should be considering and evaluating, and it may tie in directly to what you just shared, but I'd like you to speak for them for a moment.
Yeah, so it ties in exactly to what I just described, and I would encourage anybody that is looking right now to say, man, am I at the right company or am I not at the right company? Go through that process. You know, what are you looking for? What are the fundamental foundational things that you want out of a company that are like the most important? And put those down as your pillars, right? Like those are the things that like I'm not even going to get into having a conversation about, how is operations? Oh, it's great. We got the best operation in the world. Everybody's going to tell you that, right? Like define what your fundamental pillars are that you want out of a company if you're considering making a move. Because right now it's really easy to say, oh, things are hard. Maybe it's my company. Majority of the time it's not. And I'll even tell people that. I'll tell them like, hey, listen, what you're sharing with me right now, I don't believe you're going to find the fulfillment or the support you need by making a move. I think you need to look within first. And some people, it'll be a big turnoff to them, but I don't want to be the person that they make a move over and then they're resenting me because it's like, wait a minute, you're not giving me what I need. I'm like, no, we talked about this in the beginning. Like you've got to do some work as well here. So I think just getting really, really clear on what those pillars are for you that are non-negotiables that are going to help you have success, that are going to give you the support you need, that are going to give you the autonomy you need, whatever that is. Define what those are, and then when you go into conversations, that's almost like your questions that you're asking. You want to get to know how they would approach each one of these areas, and you're checking them against it, as opposed to letting the person that's recruiting you run it to where they're just sharing all the cool shit that they do.
Excellent. So it's like I'm hearing you define, I'm hearing you say that the person that is looking to make a move before they even start looking needs to create a compass that is their clear direction as to what's important to them, what's valuable to them, and to maybe even organize it like in a linear way, right? Like what's number one, what's number two, because the thing is that left to our own devices, I mean, we're going to get seduced into a conversation that can be very confusing. There are many people, as I'm sure you can imagine, that I coach that have made moves, and when I see them going through the process, it's very clear that most of the time they're not even 100% sure as to what they're looking for. It's kind of almost like you're going out dating and you don't really know like who the ideal partner is for you to have a long-term relationship. If that's what you're looking for, you're going to end up being in a lot of relationships where there are breakups because you're entering into them for the wrong reasons. So I love that. I love that perspective. So let's transition a little bit into the personal realm if we can. Well, one of the things I love about you is just the way that you self-reflect and the work that you're willing to do on yourself and the growth that you aspire to experience. Um, what are you working on personally right now in your life that you'd like to share that could be valuable?
Yeah, so this is the timing of this question is perfect. Just coming back from Park City, one of the exercises that you took us through was around presence, and what I recognize in that, and we looked at all different areas of our life and what the impact is of not fully being present. And I recognize that at work, I am very, very intentional and very present in what I do. I have not been applying that same level of commitment and presence with my family. And it was like this just shot to the heart that I'm like, wow, if I were to say what's the most important thing to me in the world, right? Like it's my family. They're everything to me. But I almost take them for granted that I don't like, and I'm not showing up and doing the work and really being present. And so, we spent some time almost describing, well, what is that ideal state with your family? What is that ideal state with your kids, your wife? And as I kind of started, bullet point or, putting those out on the different lines that came off of that process sheet that we had together, it was like, why am I not doing this? It was almost like, what is wrong? What's wrong with me? Like, why am I not taking the time to lean into this at the level that I need to? And again, I don't mean that I'm being hard on myself, but it was just this shake me wake up call to say, all right, this is where I need to do the most work right now. Like this is going to have the greatest sense of impact and fulfillment for me.
I love that it had. I love that that process had that experience for you, and that it kind of woke you up a little bit. I think that, just to make sure that you're clear on this, and I think you probably are, but even for those that are listening that may say, wow, that's me too. I think that's normal. It doesn't make it, we shouldn't be complacent with it being normal. But I think that you hit on taking for granted. We tend to take our time for granted, our time on this earth, when there's no guarantees. We tend to take our time that we have with our children for granted, but there are no guarantees, and our partners. There's a built-in urgency associated with work because work is what generates income, which pays the bills. So it's much easier to make that a priority and to get laser focused and present with our work activities because, it requires, it's about survival, right? There's more at stake, but not really. Like there's a perception there's more at stake. But in the interpersonal realm, there's a lot more at stake because of the relationships that we need to continue to nurture. It's like, my son Trey, I love him. I don't want to get emotional here, but I love him in ways that I never thought I could possibly love somebody. And when I have dinner with him, which is twice a month, I'd say, we get together, we have a nice long dinner, usually a couple hours. It's crazy to me as to how present I get. Like I'll come back, I'll be driving home and I'll call Liz, my wife, and she'll be like, how's dinner? I'm like, oh my God, like unbelievable. Like I so cherish those dinners. And I think that the reason that it's so easy for me to be present with him is because I know that it's limited. Like it's not like we have dinner together every night like we used to. So it's these precious moments where all I really want to do is just be there with him and ask him a lot of questions and have him tell me about his life. And it just fills me up. But I think that it's a practice, right? And I think that sometimes we have to scare the shit out of ourselves, bro. I mean, a little bit about what that
Mhm.
process was about is using fear as your friend. It's like, what is it costing you? Let's get real for a minute. Like if you don't know how many days you have left on this earth. You don't know how many more moments you have with your kids. So it's like, let's not forget about the importance of being present with those that are important to us. So let's talk about your dad if we can, and if it's okay with
Yeah,
you.
I would love to go there. One thing that I thought of that I think would be it's beneficial for me right now. So if it helps somebody else, I had to identify what are my distractions that were pulling me
Mm,
away
yeah.
from having those moments of presence with Carrie or with my kids.
Who's
And
Carrie?
Carl.
Carl, thank you. Thank you. Okay, now I'm not confused.
And what's interesting is like I didn't even realize I was doing this. Like I would get home and I would be there with the family, but I would be picking up my phone and checking my phone for what emails were coming in, just like is a like unconscious habit that I was doing. I'm like, why am I doing this? Right? Or I would go and I would pour myself a drink, and like all of a sudden I was like numbing myself from actually being there. And when I came back from Park City, the first thing I did, I was like, okay, I'm not going to have my phone. I'm going to put my phone away for the first hour at a bare minimum. And I'm not going to have anything to drink, not any alcohol. And I'm just going to be here for an hour and just see what happens from it. At first, it was really uncomfortable. I was like, just almost squirming a little bit. Like, how do I settle in? Like, why is there anxiety around this? But once I broke through that, like, it was like, okay, now I know what I need to do. I need to get down on my kids' level. Like, go sit on the ground, having conversations with them. Casey Granson gave me an awesome tip around
I
this.
know
Yeah.
I know where you're going with this, and I
Yeah.
want you to share it. I was going to actually ask you if you were aware of what he did. Go ahead.
Yeah. So he basically said, one of the things that was most helpful for him is he comes home, he gets down eye to eye level with his kids, and he says, something I'm proud of him for. And it is so powerful in that moment because you have to speak from the heart. You're looking at them and all of a sudden they light up, right? And they look at you in just this moment of connection that happens. Like that's what it's all about right there. And again, I am just coming off of Park City. I'm trying this, I'm giving it my best, but already that little change that I put into place is making a difference.
Okay, so what I thought you were going to talk about as it related to Casey is something different that I want to share that is really beautiful that he did after coming back from Costa Rica, almost a year ago now in the signature program. He got I believe it's a shoebox, but it
Oh
could have been
yeah.
something else. And he sat down with his kids and he said, let's decorate this together. Okay. So they decorated with like a bunch of photos and stuff. And he let his kids really have fun with decorating this shoebox. And that box sits like on his kitchen counter or something like that at his house. And when he comes home every day from work, he puts his phone in the box. And then there's
Yeah.
a certain period of time where he's just present with them, which is a really brilliant idea. I don't know if Julie gave him that idea or not, or if he came up with it on his own, but it's super beautiful. They created this together and they have this intentionality behind when dad gets home, we get his presence for a half hour, 45 minutes, whatever it is. And I so can relate to what you're talking about. I mean, it's a fight for me, bro. Like, I mean, you know me well enough to know that a lot of the things that I teach are very autobiographical. I mean, like that presentation that I did in Park City is just spawned by the things that I'm working on. Like, I absolutely will find myself grabbing this thing and going, and then I'm like, wow, this is a true addiction that I feel like
Yep.
I need to go check what Bitcoin's doing again for the seventh time today, or that that I need to check my email when I'm sitting here with my wife. I mean, it's amazing because our world is just so infused with that dopamine hit, right? Like, I mean, the whole thing is a slot machine. It's like, how do we get that quick gratification that somebody liked our post on social media, or how do we make sure that problem is solved that isn't really a big problem at the end of the day compared to everything else that's going on, and at the expense of what? So I'm glad that again that it had that impact on you, and I'm here to support you as you continue to build these disciplines to cultivate more presence in your life. So can we talk about your dad? Are you comfortable doing that?
Yeah, for sure.
So tell us a little bit about your dad. I know quite a bit about it for the last couple of years, but I'd love for everybody to understand what you've been doing with intentionality with your father.
Yeah. So my dad has always been just an absolute role model and an inspiration to me since I was a little kid. And I went off to college, and I told you about the call that I got that he was pushing me out of the nest and like, hey, you're on your own. And that was the time that all of a sudden we went from father-son relationship to friend, like best friends relationship. And he was still an incredible mentor during these times. He was my biggest advocate during my growth in my career, biggest advocate for my relationship with Carrie and I. And even with the kids, like he's just like so proud and just such a like this is his greatest joy and fulfillment. You can just see it and feel it when you're around him. And in 2020, we got some news that he was having some issues with what seemed like cognitive issues. And he went in, saw a neurologist, and at first they thought it was a tumor. There was a tumor behind his ear, and they treated that, but the neurologist said, hey, it seems like there's something more to this. Like, we want to continue doing some additional tests. And it turns out through the testing that he has a form of dementia it's really rapidly progressing, and it ends up of impacting his motor skills and his speech and his ability to communicate. And so it was like this shock, right? He's 72 years old. These are the years that he was most excited about. He had retired not too long before that and was, going to travel the world. And, I just have all these, images of him, being there as my kids grow up. And it was tough, right, to have that just, taken away from you. And so in that moment, I went from like, oh my gosh, like, I'm not going to have the next, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years. I have 3 years. And it goes back to kind of what you said, like all of a sudden there is finality, right? It's not this infinite amount of time that sometimes we allow ourselves to get fooled into thinking that we have with somebody. We only have a certain number of moments left with them. And, my intention in that moment just shifted. I was like, I'm going to make the best of every moment that I have left with him. I want to get to know him in ways that I haven't before. And it's been the greatest gift that I could have ever received. And as weird as it sounds, like I don't know that I would have ever been as intentional and been as just real and vulnerable with him had I not had this, you know, finality put to it.
Yeah. Wow. Um, Thank you for sharing. Um, my dad died abruptly. He had been sick for 10 years off and on with various things, went blind, and but it happened abruptly. It wasn't like any specific ailment. Um, and I have some regrets, like I wish that, it's like it's amazing how finality, in this case death, or the loss of memory, or knowledge of who he is, can really wake us up, right? And like shock us into action. And as much as I'm so sorry that your father's going through that, I'm happy for you both that you have had this connection over the last 2.5, 3 years. You guys have done a lot of Zoom calls and stuff, haven't you?
Yeah. We the idea actually came, we were out at dinner with you and Liz, and I was kind of sharing the story, and you mentioned the book Tuesdays with Maury, and I had heard of it, but I had never read it before. And for anybody that hasn't, I highly recommend it. It's an incredibly powerful book. And what came out of it is I was just like, this is a way for me to connect with my dad. Like I can set up a call once a week that we'll have over Zoom. He's in Texas, I'm in California, so it's not easy for me just to go to the house. And so I called him up. I was like, Dad, this could sound a little weird, but there's so much I realize I don't know about you, right? Like I don't know about your childhood. We've never talked about, all these aspects of what it was like growing up, you in college, some of the shit you got into when you and mom got married, when you and mom got divorced, right? Like I never talked, like there were some conversations that I just never had, a lot of them actually. And so I said, I'd love to, while we still can, set up a weekly call. And I wrote out this list of 40 or 50 questions that that we could go through. And I was like, maybe we'll get 2-3 questions, something like that on each one, take 30 minutes and have a cup of coffee together in the morning and record them. And it was such an incredible experience, and again, like these things that I would never have known about my father, that just made him even just a more amazing human being, to get to hear these stories and get to hear him share. And I was talking to my sister about it. I was like, this is something that I'll be able to put together at some point and share with our kids and share with her kids. And like the memory of him and in his storytelling is something that we'll have forever because of this. And so it's like I would have never thought to do something like that, right? Because I would have just been like, oh, I'll have more time. We'll talk about that next time. Or like, it gave me this, like, I got to do this. If I don't do this now, I'll never know. I'll never have the ability to.
Yeah. Yeah, you probably don't know this, maybe I've told you, but you sent me that list about a year and a half ago, I believe it was. And I've used some of those questions, so I want to say thank you. My mom is, she tends to not be very reflective of her past, her childhood, things like that. Especially if she knows that she's kind of under the gun. So what I do is I have about maybe 5 or 6 different recordings where I go to dinner with my mom, just the two of us, and I'll just hit record on my iPhone and I'll set it down on the table. And I'll usually have 2 or 3 of your questions pulled up on my phone, and I'll just ask her questions, and she doesn't know she's being interviewed.
Yeah.
Um, and what a gift that is to your father. Like I can't imagine as a father anything that would be more touching to me in my later years than to have my child take an interest in knowing about my life and just ask me a lot of questions and just be present with me. I mean, there's probably nothing that you could give him in the way of a material gift that would even come close to those moments that you shared with him. So um, thank you for sharing that.
Yeah. To your point, I initially went in thinking I was asking a favor of him. And he's shared it's been the greatest gift for him to be able to do that. So
Oh, I bet.
you're right.
I bet. Whew. Well, this feels like an appropriate pinnacle point in this conversation to end our conversation. I feel like, well, I know what an incredible guy you are. You know, Rich, who you now know, is a dear friend of mine. I guarantee you, if you ask him, hey, does Tim ever say anything about me? I brag about you a lot. I,
It's brother.
yeah, no, thank you. I admire you as a leader. I admire you as a person. I admire you as a son. I admire the work that you do to become a better person. And I kind of had a feeling that this conversation together would go all over the place, which it did, into so many beautiful areas. And I think what we're closing with here really tells everybody who Chris Ledlie is. So thank you so much for joining me on this episode, bro.
Thanks, man. Enjoyed it.
I hope that everybody that tuned in got some great value. I'm sure that you did. And I want to just say thank you for being a part of this conversation. Bye-bye.